Okay, so you know how it is, right? Like you're trying to stay on top of everything that's happening, to really get down to the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like sometimes it's just information overload, these reports and everything. It's like, ugh.
It can be a lot, yeah.
So that's kind of why we do this, right? To kind of cut through all that and get to what actually matters. So today we're going to deep dive into this company, Wellkeeps. It's traded on the KOSDQ.
Okay.
Think of that as like the Korean NASDAQ, right? It's a market for like smaller companies.
Got it.
Growth-oriented, up-and-coming companies. Their ticker is 06553, and the CEO is a guy named Park Ki-tae.
Okay.
And what really caught our eye, probably caught your eye as well, is this really ambitious plan they have to expand their business by going into the semiconductor wafer business.
Wow, okay.
Through a merger and acquisition, an M&A.
Interesting.
Now, this isn't just like a little side project. This is a pretty major move for them strategically.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and I think a little bit worrying, to be honest. This big M&A push is happening while they're dealing with some significant financial problems, some pretty big financial problems.
Oh, what?
I mean, we're talking big operating losses last year.
Oh.
And a whole bunch of legal challenges, too. Pretty serious ones, actually.
Wow.
So it makes you wonder, what's really going on here? What are they doing? What's driving this expansion?
Mm-hmm.
And are they even in a good enough position to actually pull this off?
Right.
So you, our listener, you sent us this investigative report about all of this.
Oh.
We've been digging into it, to really figure out like what are the key details here.
Yeah.
So what we want to do today is really break down this whole complicated situation. So we'll look at this proposed merger. We'll look at, what's going on with their finances, those big operating losses you mentioned in 2023.
Okay.
Their chip-on-film business, the COF business, they had to shut that down.
They had to shut it down.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's this big lawsuit, right, with this company, DB Global Chip.
Okay.
And then on top of all that, there are these multiple criminal complaints that have been filed against some of their former executives.
Oh, wow.
So by the end of this, you should have a much better idea of all the challenges that Wellkeeps is facing and what it all might mean going forward.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's start with this M&A. They want to get into this semiconductor wafer business. They say it's about creating new growth engines.
Okay.
Right, which on the surface, that sounds pretty smart, pretty forward-thinking, like they're trying to diversify, they're trying to get into a market that could be really profitable.
Right.
But this report, it also highlights some skepticism about this whole thing. Like, not everyone's buying it.
Okay.
They think, this M&A, it might not be just about future growth. It might be about something else.
Yeah. What do they think it's about?
Well, some critics think it could be a way to distract from some pretty serious problems they've got going on internally.
I see.
Like, is this a real strategic move, or are they just trying to cover something up?
Right. Trying to shift the focus a bit.
Exactly. And the timing's interesting too, right? Like, they're already struggling financially. They've got all these legal battles going on, and now they want to go and make a big acquisition. That's a lot to handle.
Yeah. I mean, a major acquisition like that, it's not just about the money, right? You need resources. You need people focused on it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're already stretched thin,
yeah, exactly.
it's risky.
So speaking of those financial struggles, let's really dig into that a little bit. We know they reported an operating loss for 2023.
Yikes.
That's pretty bad, right? I mean, that's a pretty clear sign that things aren't going well.
Yeah, not a good sign at all. And what's contributing to that loss?
Well, a big part of it is that they had to shut down their chip-on-film business, their COF business.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize they had to shut down a whole business segment. What happened there?
It all comes down to this big legal fight they're having with DB Global Chip.
Okay.
And the report goes into detail about this lawsuit. It's happening in this Seoul Central District Court. And DB Global Chip, they're going after them for a lot of money, like KRW, $8.9 billion. That's like $6.6 million.
Oh, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and this isn't something that's going to be resolved quickly either. The third hearing just happened at the end of March, and the next one isn't scheduled until May. So this whole thing, it's going to be hanging over their heads for a while.
So not only do they have this potential payout if they lose, but they've lost that whole income stream.
Right, exactly. It's like a double whammy. And it's not just the COF business either. Their new venture, Juwan Tech, the one focused on electric vehicle parts, that's not doing so hot either.
Really?
What?
I thought electric vehicles were supposed to be, like, the next big thing.
They are. That's the thing. Juwan Tech, it was supposed to be this big opportunity for them, to grow, to diversify. But the report, it says there's been this huge demand slowdown in the past year. They even call it a chasm.
A chasm? Whoa, that's not good.
No, not at all. And the division, it's still operating at a loss.
So their attempt to find, like, new ways to grow, it hasn't really worked out so far.
Not really, no. But the company, they're saying that they're doing things to try to fix this. They're talking about, like, workforce downsizing and cost cutting and stuff, trying to become more profitable.
Okay, well, that makes sense, right? I mean, if you're losing money, you have to cut costs somewhere.
Yeah, and it's a pretty common thing companies do when they're facing this kind of pressure. But the report also mentions that some industry experts, they're skeptical about whether these measures are actually going to be enough. Like, will it really turn things around for them?
Right, especially with the lawsuit and this underperforming new business.
Exactly. So it's like they're trying to, like, tighten their belts at the same time they're making this huge bet on this merger. It's kind of contradictory,
Yeah, definitely. So what about these mounting legal risks the report talks about?
Oh, yeah, that's even more worrying than the DB Global Chip thing, I think. There are seven criminal complaints filed against former executives and people connected to them.
7? Seriously? That's a lot. What are they being accused of?
Well, it's stuff like embezzlement, inappropriate investments, unfair transactions within the company. It's basically like white-collar crime.
Oh, wow. That's serious stuff.
Yeah, and if these allegations are true, it means they've lost even more money. And it makes you wonder about, what kind of controls they have in place internally.
Right. And these cases, they're pretty far along, right? The report mentioned the Seoul High Court.
Yeah, some of them are. So it's not like this is a new thing, and it could drag on for who knows how long.
Which means more uncertainty for the company and for investors.
Exactly. So with all this going on, the M&A, the financial losses, these legal issues, how are investors reacting to all of this?
I would imagine they're not thrilled.
Yeah, the report says there's a lot of unease in the market, which is completely understandable. I mean, when a company is going through all of this and then they announce they want to buy another company, it raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, like, are they focusing on the right things? Are they even going to be around in a few years?
Right, and the report mentions this interesting thing about their cash equivalent assets. They had said they had around KRW 20 billion.
Okay.
But the latest figures show it's actually way lower, like KRW 13.9 billion.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder about their financial flexibility. Can they actually afford all of this?
And with all these legal expenses, and if those investments don't work out...
Yeah, their cash could disappear pretty quickly. And then there's this quote in the report from some accounting expert. They're not named, but they say, it's a textbook move when a company facing multiple embezzlement and breach of trust cases starts throwing around the M&A card.
Oh, wow.
It's about masking core problems, not solving them.
Ouch. That's a pretty harsh assessment.
Yeah, it is. But it's also a common concern, right? Like a big M&A, it can create a lot of buzz and maybe distract people from the problems you're having. But at the end of the day, you still have to deal with those problems.
Right. Those problems don't magically disappear.
No, they don't. Now, there is one positive thing the report mentions. Their biggest shareholder, they bought a bunch of shares back in March, like 516,000 shares. So that could be seen as a good sign, right? Like this person who knows the company well, they still believe in it.
Yeah, could be a vote of confidence. But, it's just one thing.
Right. You got to weigh that against everything else that's going on. And let's not forget, their stock price has taken a huge hit. It's down over 50% from its peak.
Yeah, that's a big drop.
It is. And then there's the talk of another capital reduction.
Another one?
Yeah, they've already done 2.
That's not usually a good sign. You can kind of signal that they're, still having financial troubles.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, a capital reduction, it basically means they're reducing the company's stated capital. It can be a way to offset losses, but if you're doing it over and over again, it can be a red flag.
Definitely. Can make investors nervous.
And to top it all off, the report says that Wellkeeps HITech, they haven't responded to any requests for comment on any of this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're just staying silent.
That's not a good look.
Yeah.
Especially when there's so many questions swirling around.
No, it isn't. It just makes investors even more uneasy.
Yeah, transparency is so important in situations like this.
Absolutely. So when you put all of this together, the report basically concludes that there's no real recovery plan in sight. Like, industry experts, they're not convinced that Wellkeeps has a plan to actually deal with all of this.
So they're pushing for this big M&A, which shows they want to grow, but they haven't really addressed these financial and legal problems.
Exactly. So it's like, what are they doing?
Right. It's a bit of a head-scratcher.
It is. So to summarize, we've got a company with some big financial problems. They had to shut down a key part of their business. They're facing all these lawsuits, and yet they're trying to buy another company.
It's a bold move, to say the least.
It is. And it leaves us with some big questions. Can this merger really fix their problems? Are investors right to be worried? And what's going to happen to Wellkeeps HITech in the long run?
Yeah, those are all good questions.
So for you, our listener, this is a good example of how things aren't always what they seem. You see a company announcing a big merger, and it sounds exciting.
Right.
But when you dig deeper, you realize there's a lot more to the story.
You got to look beyond the headlines.
You do. You have to look at their finances, their legal situation, all of it. And that's what we're trying to do here, to give you the full picture.
To connect all the dots.
Exactly. So thinking about everything we've talked about today, if you were an investor or just someone following this company, what would you be paying the closest attention to? What would be the biggest red flags for you?
That's a good question. And one that everyone should be asking themselves.
Definitely.
It's a good reminder that even with all the information out there, sometimes the most important thing is knowing what questions to ask.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's it for our deep dive on Wellkeeps HITech. Hopefully you've got a better understanding of the whole situation now. And until next time, stay informed and stay curious.
See you next time.